Welcome! Yesterday I made this small vase primarily to show you how to do the very basics of wheel throwing, selecting the right clay, centering and doing a cylinder. Of course, with the cylinder you can then move on and do all kinds of shapes, bowl, pitcher, and in this case I decided to do a small vase. Now the vase is little less than leather hard and it's ready for me to do the initial trimming. I decided to do some carving on this one, so I will only be trimming the top and very little in the bottom because I want to keep the thickness of the wall in order for me to do the carving without going through. So let's take a look at that. Just like anything else in pottery, you can use whatever tools you find necessary to do the job you want. And if you ask 10 different potters about what tools to use for trimming or to do trimming at all, you will get 10 different answers. Personally, I like lots of different tools for trimming, but one of my favorite tools is this one from Hsinchuen Lin. I'm not sure I pronounced that name correct. I hope you correct me, Hsinchuen, if you ever see any of these videos. Anyway, these little tools that he makes, and you can buy them from his Etsy shop. I will put a link in the description. I really like them. I have a small set of them. This one have like a curve, which is really good. Oh, here it is. This one have a curve. It's curved on both sides. It's very good for necks like this. Also have some straight ones. And a smaller one, and but this one is really good for trimming the neck, of course, because it have that curve. So let's start with that. As I said when I was throwing this one, the neck is a little thicker than what I want it to be, and that is necessary, I find at least, in order to not make it too wobbly or uneven. I do deliberately throw it a little bit thicker than what I want, and that way I can also do a little bit of the shaping of the neck. I find it always a little bit tricky when you do these curved pieces, not to get marks, because I mean in my case I want to end up with a smooth surface. And that can be a little bit tricky. But if you kind of bend it and around the neck, it usually turns out pretty well. But it takes a bit of practice, I can admit that. So in this case, what I want to do is I want to make it a little bit thinner, especially in the middle part of it. Not so much in the top and not so much in the bottom of the neck. That will make it look a little more elegant. Sometimes it's a good idea to put your fingers inside and out and to see how much thickness you have left, because at this stage, of course, you don't want to break through the side of your pot. And now what I'm experiencing is that it's not really sharp enough. And I have this diamond grinder that I use, and I usually have a small piece of wood and just put it like this, and on the side here, and just grind it a little bit. Yeah, that should be good. Yeah, that helped. Sometimes it's a good idea to lean back a little bit to kind of get a view of the shape of your pot, because if you're much up close, it can be really difficult to judge it. So please move back and view it. And it's not bad. One of the things I want to do is also, as you can see, it's the curve is nice, and then it goes out, but then it's a little too flat here. So I want to take a little bit off the shoulder, but not too much, because, as I said, I want to carve it. But I do want to take a little bit off the shoulder. Yeah, that's better. I like the curve now. It gets a little more round. A little more. Yeah, that's better. Now the sun went away, so it suddenly is a little darker. I hope you can live with that. A lot of potters will tell you never to do any trimming on the inside. Well, I usually don't listen too much, so I do it anyway, and I actually had some really good results, especially when you have a thin neck vase like this and you want to make it a little more elegant and appealing. I mean, you don't have to go much down. It's just like the very top of it. Looks good. In order to get the surface completely smooth, I like to use a metal rib, and because especially on these curves, it can be difficult with the normal trimming tools to make it completely smooth. And with the metal rib, you can get those last marks off. You may have noticed that I'm not trimming anything down here, and that's because I'm going to do carving, as I said. So I will only use the metal rib to just smoothen the surface a little bit, and then I won't do anything more, and then not with the button after the carving. Now the shape looks good. There's a few more steps that you can take that I sometimes take, sometimes not. I sometimes use these rubber. Now it went so light again, I'm just going to turn it down a little bit. Now I got the basic shape with my normal trimming tools. The last step I want to take sometimes is using this rubber rib. That will smoothen the surface even more. So, now it's almost done. For the very last part of it, I want to burnish it a little bit with a shiny stone. You could also use your fingers, your hands, something. With this, I can make it very, very smooth. Just be sure when you do this, you don't press it too hard. Just very, very lightly, and let it roll over the clay. By the way, as you probably see, after it dried up, it was actually perfect when I made it, but after it dried up, it's not completely even. It's wobbling a little bit at the top. But as a very experienced potter told me, do you know how to stop that wobbling? Probably not, but the easy way, stop the wheel. Now there's no wobbling. Okay, it's kind of a joke, of course, but the thing is, when it's not moving around, it does look even. The shaking that you see here is very little, and you only see that because it's turning around. And of course, the pot is not going to turn around once it's made and stand there on the table or in the window or something. So don't be so worried about it. Of course, if it's totally crazy, then well, maybe it's a little bit too much. But in this case, don't worry about it. So, now I'm done with this part. So next step, I want to do the carving. But it's still a little bit too wet. I need it to be a little drier on the lower side, but it's fine on the top side. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to put this plastic over it. I'm not going to cover the entire pot, but I'm just going to cover the top of it. But of course, be very careful now because, as you probably know, at this stage, it's very fragile. So I'm just going to leave it like this so it doesn't dry too fast on the top, but can dry a little more at the bottom. And then I will get back to you to do some carving, maybe later this evening or tomorrow. A couple of days have gone by. I got a little bit busy, and so I covered up my pot in plastic, not to have it too dry. So now it's got to this almost leather hard stage, which is perfect for carving, which is exactly what I'm going to do. I did finish off the trimming. I also trimmed the bottom, made a nice foot rim. I left my mark at the side, and it's ready for carving. At this stage, you have to be very careful with the pot because it is very fragile, and that's kind of a tricky part of doing the carving. When doing the carving, I like to have some sort of supporting surface. I just use a pillow, or sometimes I have a bit of foam that I use, something like this. In this case, I think I'm just going to use my pillow, and because that's gonna offer some support when I start carving. I have a lot of carving tools that I like to use. I'll hold it in the box here. One of my favorite ones is this one from Mud Tools. You can get it in a round shape like this. There's also one in a V shape. I also use these are very nice tools. Diamond core tools, carving tools. They're super sharp. So they're nice even if you get to a little more dry than this leather hard. They just cut through everything, and you can get different shapes of them. Now you maybe notice that this one is on a different kind of stick, and that's because if you buy this carving tool, this is a little tip for you. If you buy these carving tools from Diamond Tools, you buy them with this stick from Diamond Tools, and they're quite expensive. And I think the stick alone costs like half of it, maybe, I don't know, $10, $20 or something, and then the tip is a little less. But you can also buy the tips, and it's actually quite easy to just make a stick like this and screw it onto. It actually works really well, and that cut the price into about a third or something. So now I got it for, I think, $10 or something, instead of 30 or whatever it is when you buy the full one. So that's a little trick for you. I also use, once I made the initial carving and I need to kind of expand it or shape it, I use these carving tools from, I'm throwing them away, from CM Tools, and there's a lot of shops where you can buy them. They're not too expensive. Sometimes you can buy a set like this with different shapes that are very useful. I also use a small metal rib for smoothing the carving, but even also tools that you find in your kitchens. I found spoons to be very useful, and yeah, so I think that's my box. So in this case, what I want to do is I want to make some carvings down the side, starting at about this point. But before I do that, I want to make a mark. I usually use just a pencil because it's going to burn away in the brisk fire to mark where I want to start the carving. That's going to make it a little easier to make sure that they are all aligned, which in this case I would like. So let's go ahead and do that. So I placed my pot on the wheel, and I'm using just a standard pencil. It's nice if you can find, this is actually a little bit too hard, if you can take the softest one you can find, because you don't want to actually carve into it with the pencil. You just want to mark it so you can see where you want to do your carvings. And again, you can wash off the pencil marks, but don't worry too much about it because it's going to burn off in the brisk fire anyway. So what I want to do is I want to start I want to have two levels where I start the carvings, one for the bigger ones and then smaller ones in between. I'm going to make two marks. One of them is going to be here. So that's it, and another one is going to be down here. So, that's it. I don't know if you can see it from there, but if you look here, I hope you can see it. There's two marks, one here and one here, and that's going to be a guide for me doing the carvings. So, back on my pillow. I'm now ready to do the carvings, and in this case I'm gonna do probably 4 of the big ones, and then in between that some smaller ones. So I'm just gonna start on one side, and then I'm gonna do the opposite side, and then I'm gonna do 90-degree angle on that. I'm not gonna use any tools to make it very precise. You can use some tools to measure the angles. In this case, I'm just going to do it by hand. So I'm going to start out with this. Make sure that your tool is clean of old clay. Then I'm going to start here. Once you get to this point, make sure you don't cut into the foot rim. Don't worry too much about the edges and stuff. I'm going to expand these carvings later. So at this point, it doesn't look so amazing, but it's a good start. So I'm going to do now on the very opposite side of this, so that's going to be here, a similar one. So now we have 2, and now I'm going to do one in between, which is here. And another one on the other side of it, which is about here. So now we have the four major ones that I want to do. Now a little bit in doubt now because of the size, if I should make, I think actually I will make 8. So I'll make, in between here I will make the bigger ones too. Or should I just make, no, I think I'm actually I'm changing my mind as I go. I think I'm still going to use big one, but I'm going to start higher up here and make it all the way through and then have a smaller one in between. So let's go ahead and do that. So now we got 8 of them. Every second one going up to the upper mark and every second one to the lower mark. I think that's a pretty good start. Yeah. See, that looks fine. In the beginning, when we started throwing this one, we had 2 kilos of clay. This one I made a little bit thicker in the walls, but because as you can see, now that we're carving in, there needs to be enough clay in the grooves, and I'm even gonna make these grooves a little bit deeper once I start scraping them. So you do require a little more clay in order to do that. But already now, having scraped off this, if we measure the weight of the pot. We are down to 1.3 kilos. So we lost almost 700 grams, because some of it, of course, is from the water evaporating. Also, we trimmed it, so we took out some of the clay. I trimmed quite a lot at the bottom, took a lot of clay out there. Now I'm scraping out things here. So we're probably going to end up with a little more than a kilo, which is a good weight for this size of vase. I know that it's a goal for many potters to make it as light as possible. I don't always think that you need to make your pots very light, because this is a vase. It's gonna sit there. You're not gonna move it around, and you're gonna fill it up with water anyway. So it's gonna be much more heavy. I don't think for a pot like this it has to be very light. It's a different thing if it's a cup or bowl or something that you're going to move around on a table. In that case, of course, you want it to be lighter. I would like that anyway. It feels a little nicer when you're drinking, or something that is not too heavy. But for a vase like this, I'm only being focused on the shape I like. So I'm not too worried about the thickness. So now I think, let me take a look here. I was thinking about making some smaller cuts in the middle, but I'm actually not sure that I want to do that. What do you think? Maybe. Yeah. I think what I'm going to do now is I'm going to let it stand a little bit, because I like, once I cut this, I cut into clay that's a little more fresh, of course. So that's a little softer. You can't see it there. So the clay that I cut into here is a little fresher. So that's a little softer. Before I move on and shape these grooves, I wanted to dry just a little bit more. But I don't want it to dry too fast, so I'm just going to cover it up lightly with a plastic bag. Not too much, but just lightly, so it doesn't dry too fast. I'll get back to you very soon. Now that the pot had a little bit of time to settle and the grooves have dried up, so it's leather hard to about the same stage as the surface, I can start working the grooves. That's the next stage. I wanna carve out the grooves a little more now. As you can see, or maybe you can't see it, but now they're kind of rough in the edges, and they're very, they only have that size that I made them with my mud tools, and I wanna expand them a little bit in the middle and make them smaller in the end. Well, not make them smaller, but just bigger in the middle, so they become a little more like a drop. And to do that, I use my metal rib, this very small metal rib. I use that mostly. I also sometimes use a spoon, and I have some other carving tools that I sometimes use, like this one. It's very good for that as well. This takes a lot of time. It literally can take me hours to finish a pot like this. So I'm not going to go through the whole pot now. I'm just going to show you some of the basics of what I do. If you look at this, it's rough in the edges. I made one. It's not completely finished, but as you see this one, it's much smoother, nicer in many ways. I will probably make it a little bit wider in the middle to make more of a drop shape. But the way I do it is I put it here. Maybe we should zoom in just a little bit. Just like that. And I use this metal tool right now. And I basically scrape away the edges. Go down all the way here. And this is why I want it to be not too dry, but dry enough not to leave too many crumbles on the way. So like somewhere just before leather hard seems to be best, at least for this stage. And then after I've done this, I will leave it to dry a little bit more, and then maybe I will go back and continue doing a little more shaping when it's close to bone dry. So I'll take the first side first. Clean up the tool now and then, so don't distribute all these little pieces of clay, but instead get them removed. And again, working with this, you have to be super careful, because as you can see, my neck is leaning on the pillow, and there's no strength in that now, because it's only dry clay. And yeah, well, as you probably know, if you worked with this stage of clay, it's very fragile. So any kind of hit or any kind of pressure on it, and it will break off. I actually had quite a lot of, especially with pots with thinner necks. This one is not super thin, but with the very thin necks, I had quite a few of them break off doing this exact process. Sometimes you can then save it. Sometimes you can slip it back on, and sometimes you can reshape your pot and make it with a bit of a shorter neck. But it's a drag anyway, and it's so sad when you put all this work into your pot, and then in the very final stages you destroy it, or at least it doesn't end up like you expected it to do. So that was the first side of it, and then I'll go to the other side. It's actually fun to work with clay at this stage, because you can make so many little details, and you can get it all the lines and the sizes of these grooves. You can make it really, really perfect if you spend some time with it. I like doing this kind of work. It's very meditative in a way. It's completely different from the pace of wheel throwing, which I also enjoy very much. The fact that you can sit down and 10 minutes, 15 minutes later have a really nice looking pot. But this process does take quite a long time. See, now it's much better. It's still not perfect. I will work a little more with it, but what I do when I get to this stage, usually I will do all of them before I move on to this. But what I like to do is to use a sponge. Just damp it, not completely wet, but wet enough to make an impact. And you can just clean up so the edges don't get too sharp, but they're still very distinct. But this way you can kind of clean it up a little bit. As you can see here, I don't know how well you can see it, but then it becomes a little cleaner, and then also sometimes you notice, hey, this part down here needs to be scraped off a little more, and so sometimes by doing this with the sponge, you reveal certain areas that you wanna work a little more. You can also basically just use your finger and brush it or burnish it. Sometimes you can even push these edges out a little bit, unless you want super sharp edges, and then you need to use some sort of a metal tool. So, see now it looks much better. I'm not sure that it's finished like this, but at least I kind of like this. So I will continue doing the rest of the pot, and I'll get back to you when we reach the finish line. Last night I finished up the vase, the carvings. I decided not to do too much, just the ones that I showed you how to do. And then I burnished it a little bit and used the sponge to kind of even out, make the edges a little bit softer. And I think that it, all in all, I think it turned out really well. So now we're ready for bisque firing this. And as I mentioned before, when you have vases like this, especially with thin necks and very delicate tops, you have to be very, very careful, because bone dry clay is like a biscuit. It's very fragile. Just the tiniest push and it breaks off. Promise me, I tried this. Don't do that. Next step after the bisque firing is, of course, glazing. I already did a lot of carvings, and I just want to show you a few examples of how it can turn out after glazing. Because what I like about the carving is the way that the glaze breaks over the edges. And of course you can do, this is a very simple, very elegant type of carving. I also done some, this is one with glazing, where I did it a little more randomly, or not randomly, but not like just up and down, but in and out and in between. And this have a blue glaze with some cobalt oxides. I really like how this turned out, a small vase. This is one of my favorites, a ball. Again, this is carved out pretty simple, except that I kind of turned the carvings a little bit, kind of gives it a little bit of light, and I like how this turned out. Also made a lot of these smaller bowls. I don't actually have so many now because, I don't know, for one reason or another, my customers like these ones very much, so most of them have been sold out. I do have a few ones left that I keep for myself. But these ones are just examples of other ways of carving your pottery, which is a fun thing to do. It is very time consuming, but I very much recommend you try it out. It is a very interesting way of shaping your pot. That's all I had in this video, and as always, I hope that you will subscribe to my channel, and that way you will get notified about new videos. There are some new videos coming up. I will do more about glazing, I'll do more about wheel throwing, and I hope to see you soon again. Have a good day.